All right, happy Sabbath. Today is June 9, 2018, and we're going to continue our studies, essentially continue with the Alpha Apostasies. We know it started in heaven, but it continues on earth, Adam and Eve started their apostasy. The children of Israel in the wilderness started their apostasies. Spiritual Israel has their apostasies also. So we've been studying at the 1919 Bible Conference, and what our leaders have done, specifically when they started doubting the testimonies that was written down by Ellen White and saying that it's not inspired. They start picking apart the testimonies and say, okay, this we can believe, another we don't have to believe, right? So that is what we're doing. But when we study about the leaders, the most prominent leader that is associated with a leader that apostatized and became the most vocal enemy of the message, and the most, used the most, terrible language. He even attacked Ellen White personally, not on a, not in a political way or a diplomatic way. He even attacked her personally in his writings, and his name is Dudley Canright. Right? He became very famous. Right? And he became famous, not because he was a famous Seventh-day Adventist preacher, but he became famous because his attacks on the Seventh-day Adventist Church and Ellen White. Right? So who's Dudley Canright? Right? Dudley Canright was somebody who was baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Actually, I'm pretty sure he was. I can't remember whether he was baptized by James White, but when he got married for the second time, because his wife died of tuberculosis, his second wife, it was James White that married him. And they were very close. James White and Dudley Canright was very close. With Ellen White, they were very good friends. And he was a very prolific speaker, and he held many evangelistic meetings. And he was very successful. All right? It became quite amazing when you realize that how much he attacked Ellen White. When during the time that he was with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, when he was preaching for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, what he wrote about Ellen White, and then I'm putting this because you can compare it and see how different it is when he decides to attack the message, what he wrote about Ellen White. As to the Christian character of Sister White, I beg to leave to say that I think I know something about it. I've been acquainted with Sister White for 18 years. More than half the history of our people. I've been in their family time and again, sometimes week at a time. I've been in their house and family. I've traveled with them. I've been with them in private and in public, in meeting and out of meeting. And I have had the very best chance to know something of the life, character, and spirit of brother and sister White. As a minister, I've had to deal with all kinds of persons and all kinds of characters. I think I can judge something of what a person is, at least after years of intimate acquaintance. I know Sister White to be an unassuming, modest, kind-hearted, noble woman. Those traits in her character are not simply put on and cultivated, but they spring gracefully and easily from her natural disposition. She's not self-conceited, self-righteous, self-important, and as fanatics always are. I've heard Sister White speak hundreds of times, and I've read all her testimonies through and through, most of them many times. I've never been able to find one immoral sentence in the whole of them, or anything that is not strictly pure and Christian, nothing that leads them away from the Bible or Christ And there I find the most earnest appeals to obey God, to love Jesus, to believe the scriptures. He goes on and on, the paragraphs about how he believes in Ellen White, how he believes in the message, what the Seventh-day Adventist message was, Right. And this is what he wrote in 1885. The problem was that he also suffered from depression, right? He wrote it. He wrote, "To those in doubting castles, among the most dangerous places which pilgrims pass in these days of Bunyan," right? Like the Pilgrim's Progress. He was using Pilgrim's Progress as a foundation for this article. It's in the doubting castles. Many poor pilgrim was caught up in the ground, shut up in this terrible old castle, and then finally destroyed by the keeper, giant despair, right? I remember reading the story, but I don't remember the details anymore, if anybody knows that. But he would have waves of depression, right? He would actually be a very prolific speaker, and then suddenly he would go into these episodes of severe depression. Manic phase. Yes. It's almost like we these days can kind of relate to that as a bipolar disease, right?
Did he charge Ellen White?
Yes. Yeah. 25 years ago, I embraced this message. The complete system of truth which is presented to me seemed to me something wonderful and very glorious. The study of the Bible was a continual feast to me. To preach it to others and see them embrace it, it filled my heart with gladness and peace. But at length things came up at which threw me into doubt in some points, and finally were the occasion of my ceasing to preach. So he would actually stop preaching for months at a time, and sometimes years. He would actually just leave the church. But then he would come back again, and they would accept him again because he was very good. He was very good, right? I wish to give a few reasons why I still think that the work is all right, that the Lord is in it, and that these doubts are not well-founded. He goes on and on. But my friend, is this your condition? How long have you been there? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Haven't you settled it? Then give it up. Come in those who have settled it. Where there is faith and hope and zeal and active work for God and men. Look at the grand truths of which our people hold, the new earth, the beautiful city, all our doctrines, the resurrection, the real life hereafter, the literal coming of Christ, sleep of the dead, destruction of sin and sinners, love of God, all these grand lines of prophecy, unmistakable, pointing to the end near. Can you give up all these? Forget them and shut them from your heart? Can you once more have confidence in intangible spirits, eternal hell, sprinkling for baptism, Sunday Sabbath, or millennium? Sure. Strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Wow, he says, how could you, all these grand truths, put all together, how can you actually go against it? I really couldn't. Even though I actually had these waves of depression, I would leave for months and sometimes years, but I was always want to come back again. All right. And he also had personal problems, right? This is him and his wife, right? About 2 years ago, I met with personal trials in connection with the work, which seemed to be more than I could bear. His wife died of tuberculosis, right? Yeah. But the amazing thing was that when his wife was dying with tuberculosis, he left her. Left her, and he went with James White. Now, James White was starting to become ill, and he constantly wanted to work with James White. And people started to realize that he was setting himself up always to be the assistant of James White, so that when James White passes, he would actually become the president of General Conference, right? Yeah. He had high ambitions. He wanted to be a very popular preacher, right? Yeah. For I endured them very well. For about a year, I became wholly discouraged. He would doubt. I began to doubt about the work in general, till finally I ceased labor altogether, not desiring to do anything more in the cause. I had fun actually going through the Review and Heralds from the Adventist archives and just reading all these things. And I would start reading other things. Wow, it is quite amazing what these people went through. And the thing that is, he also wrote a lot of things, and he wrote everything about Ellen White, and he wrote all about his depression and how he came back, and he became a witness for a lot of people. I passed 4 months in this way. I looked in every direction to see if there was not some mistake in our doctrine, or if I could not go some other way. But I could not see why, according to the Bible, the great pillars of our faith were not sound. I talked with ministers of other churches to see what they would say about it. Why would talk to ministers of other churches? But in every case, they were wholly ignorant on the subject, and that their arguments were no better than those I had heard and refuted 100 times. What happened was that he became a very powerful debater. He had a very unusual talent for debating, and he would win, right? He would win. I freely talked over with Elder Butler, G.I. Butler, Brother and Sister White, and others about my difficulties and trial. They did all they could and all I could ask to assist me. As I took hold again to labor and tried to look on the side of courage and faith in the work, I found my difficulties disappearing. So when he started working and things became better again, then he became happy again, because he became more successful. All right? Yeah. And now, in 1884, he went to the General Conference meeting, and Ellen White was there. And he decided, after he had gone and he came back, he decided to make a confession of what he went through. And this was published in the Review and Herald. And Ellen White made a comment about this. Most of the readers of the Review know the part which I have acted in this cause for many years. Right? I've been preaching and writing. They know that for the past 2 years, I have dropped out of the work. I wish here to state why this was so. So 12 years ago, here he basically says, one of the reasons why is I received a testimony from Sister White. I felt that it was too severe, and that some of it was not true. Instead of holding on to my faith in the work and to God and waiting for him to make it clear, I became tried and quit preaching a short time. But I soon got mostly over this and went to work again, though I did not feel exactly right towards Sister White, nor fully accepted all the testimony. Right. Some 5 years since, I received another testimony while under great discouragement. This I did not receive at all well, but I felt hard towards Sister White and soon quit the work entirely. Right? So he went on farming. Yeah, he did not want to take reproof. When somebody told him, you are doing the wrong thing, this is what you need to do, he always had a high self-esteem of himself, and he did not want to accept correction, right? And it was Ellen White. And when Ellen White writes Testimonies, it's also published in the Testimonies. Yeah? How many volumes of it is actually published? So a lot of people will read it as well, right? And he took it personally, all right? Okay. Here's Ellen White's testimony. This is after Ellen White. This is during one of his first times that he left, right? I was made sad to hear of your decision. But I had reason to expect it. It is a time when God is testing and proving his people. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken. Oh, wow. There has to be shaking. Only those will stand whose souls are riveted to the eternal rock. Those who lean to their own understanding, those who are not constantly abiding in Christ, will be subject to just such changes as this. If your faith has been grounded in men, we may then expect just such results. But if you had decided to cut all connection with us as a people, I have one request to make, for your own sake as well as for Christ's sake. Keep away from our people. Do not visit them or talk your doubts and darkness among them. Satan is full of exultant joy that you have stepped from beneath the banner of Jesus Christ and stand under his banner. See, he sees in you one he can make a valuable agent to build up his kingdom, right? So his agents are the people that are from within, right? Not only from people without, because the people that are from within are better agents for Satan. You have ever had a desire for power, right? He wanted to become the president. He didn't become the president of General Conference, so he eyed the presidency of the Michigan Conference. Instead, it was his friend Butler that became the president. And he says, you know what? If they don't elect me as the president, I will quit preaching for them. And he did quit for a while. He wanted to be popular. And this is one of the reasons for your present positions. But I beg of you to keep your doubts, your questionings, your skepticism to yourself. The people have given you credit for much, so for more strength of purpose and stability of character than you possessed. You are actually very unstable. They thought you were a strong man, and when you breathe out your dark thoughts and feelings, Satan stands ready to make these thoughts and feelings so intensely powerful in their deceptive character that many souls will be deceived and lost through the influence of one soul. Wow. When you felt these waves of depression, what was it actually? Satan. Wow. You know what? I was just thinking, wow, could it be that sometimes when you feel discouraged and all that, it's not just a psychological, mental, medical condition? It's actually Satan. Satan is actually encouraging you. Right? We all sometimes like say, well, it's a disease. Well, let's do this, let's do that. But you know what? Sometimes it's actually Satan. You have wanted to be too much and make a show and noise in the world. And as the result, your sun will surely set in obscurity. Ellen White said, your sun will set in obscurity. And this is a prediction of what actually is going to happen to him. And this happened to him after he left. Right. Every day you are meeting with an eternal loss. The schoolboy who plays truant thinks he is cheating his parent and his teacher. But who is meeting with the great loss? Is it not himself? Is he not cheating and deceiving himself, robbing himself of the knowledge he might have? God would have us become efficient in copying the example of Christ in good works. But you are playing truant. You are nursing a feeling which will sting and poison your soul to its own ruin. Playing truant upon important eternal things, robbing your soul of the richness, the knowledge, and the fullness of Christ. Your ambition has soared so high, it will accept of nothing short of elevation of self. You do not know yourself. What you have always needed was a humble, contrite heart. You know, these things he didn't want to accept. Right? Wow. Actually, all these things were true. And he had this, Ellen White had a dream. And this is a dream. It's a very interesting dream. Dear Brother M. She wrote it in 5 testimonies. She wrote it in the testimonies, right? She actually sent a letter to Dudley Canright, and a copy of it is always kept. So it can be printed in the testimonies, and it's printed, and it says Brother M. But it's actually Canright. This is about Canright. I had an impressive dream last night. I thought you were on a strong vessel, sailing on very rough waters. Sometimes the waves beat over the top and you were drenched with water. You said, I shall get off. This vessel is going down. No, said one who appeared to be the captain. This vessel sails into the harbor. She will never go down. But you answered, I shall be washed overboard. As I am neither captain nor mate, who cares? I shall take my chances on that vessel you see yonder. Now, I'm going to go on that vessel over there. Said the captain, I shall not let you go there, for I know that vessel will strike the rocks before she reaches the harbor. You straighten yourself up and said with great positiveness, this vessel will become a wreck. I can see it just as plain as it can be. The captain looked upon you with piercing eye and said firmly, I shall not permit you to lose your life by taking that boat. The timbers of her framework are worm-eaten, and she is a deceptive craft. If you had more knowledge, you could discern between the spurious and the genuine, the holy and the appointed to utter ruin. You know, when Canright eventually decided to leave, he made a prediction. When I leave, what is going to happen to the Seventh-day Adventist Church? The Seventh-day Adventist Church will collapse and will no longer exist afterwards. And that's what he predicted. You know what? That's Ellen White's dream. What he said, I'm going to go on that other ship because this ship is... Now, this is why people are always teaching, don't leave the... Is it talking about an organization or a set of truths? It's the set of truths. Do not leave this set of truths, because the other boat with that other set of truths is going to sink. This set of truths will make it into the harbor. All right? I awoke, but it was this dream that leads me to write to you. I was feeling deeply over some things when a letter came saying that you were under great temptation and trial. You are great temptation. Do we sometimes feel we're under great temptation and trial? We're stressed and depressed. What is it, Brother M? Is Satan tempting you again? What is Ellen White saying? It could be Satan's talking to you. Right? Is God permitting you to be brought to the same place where you have failed before? Will you let unbelief take possession of your soul? Will you fail every time as did the children of Israel? God help you to resist the devil and to come forth stronger from every trial of your faith. And sometimes he would hear voices. These days, if we say, oh, are you hearing voices? What do we do right away? Medication, what? Haldol? Yeah, right away, put him in a psych ward. Could it be that Satan is actually talking to you? Be careful how you move. Make straight paths for your feet. Close the door to unbelief and make God your strength. If perplexed, hold still. Make no move in the dark. I am deeply concerned for your soul. This may be the last trial that God will grant you. Advance not one step in the downward road to the perdition. Wait and God will help you. Be patient and the clear light will appear. If you yield to impressions, you will lose your soul. And the soul is of great value with God. Right. You can see Ellen White's, pretty much a diagnosis of why he's depressed. Then this is what happened. You know what? He came back. You then humbled your heart and upon your knees asked me to forgive you for the things you have said about me and my work. You said, you have no idea how mean I have talked about you. I assured you I would just as freely forgive you as I hope Jesus would forgive me my sins and errors. You stated there in the presence of several that you had said many things to my injury, all of which I assured you I freely forgave you, for it is not against me. Wow, doesn't this sound like somebody? Do you remember a certain prophet in the Bible said, they're not rejecting me. Who are they rejecting? Who was that? Samuel, right? Samuel, right? Right. They're not rejecting me. It's not against me. I don't take this personally. Even you injure me with your words, it is not personal for me because you are actually going against God. Yeah. None of these things were against me. I was only a servant bearing the message God gave me. It was not I personally that you were arrayed against. It was the message that God sent to you through the humble instrument. I'm the humble instrument. It was Christ that you injured, not I. I do not want you, I said, to confess to me. Make all straight between your soul and God, and all that will be right between you and me. Right? Wow. Right. Now this is what Ellen White wrote. We are continually grateful to God that we felt indeed at home, and that Brother Canright had met with so great a change in his feelings, that he had been transformed by the sanctifying grace of Christ, and that peace and hope and faith in present truth were again cherished in his heart. Elder Canright saved to the cause, his precious family led into the ways of truth and righteousness, I said in my heart as I looked upon them, saved from ruin. So Canright actually went in and out 4 times. Eventually, the 5th time, he left for good. Right? Now, at this camp meeting, he also said, "Brethren, I will say this." This is Canright. "So far as I'm concerned, I will start right here. And all that I have, all that I am, I will put into this work and take my risk of everything. I will never do this backing up anymore." I'm not going to back up, come back in and out, in and out. No, that's not it. "And I believe that if I ever go back from this, I am lost. All I have, I will give to this cause. I believe there is in its truth that which will save men. I have seen drunkards saved by it, and the wickedest of men saved by it. And may God help us to triumph with it when Jesus comes." The problem is that this was his last. This is basically his last confession. That says, I'm not going to back out of this again. But 3 years later, this was in 1884. In 1887, he did leave the church and for the final time. All right? Okay. You know, he was a very powerful preacher, and a lot of people were converted because of him. And he was a very powerful debater. He will debate so many preachers from other denominations. He was saying, okay, let's debate. And his favorite subject that he would debate is the Sabbath. He would debate about the Sabbath. And he would debate them into a corner that they can never get out. And all of them will lose. He was so good at debating that a lot of the preachers from other conferences will call him, okay, let's have a debate with this other pastor. And he would come and debate for them. Right? He learned to debate from a man called Moses Hull. Have you heard of Moses Hull? All right, we'll learn about Moses Hull. All right, he learned from debate, and he craved popularity. He wanted to be the General Conference president. He wants to be a popular minister, right? And he eventually says, you know what? These Adventist meetings that I'm preaching at, it's too small. I want to be at a big meeting like Dwight Moody or something like that. You know, I want to be able to preach about non-biblical subjects, and thousands of people will come, right? You know, because he was so confident in his skill as a debater and a preacher that he thought that people wanted to see him because he was so good in his talents. But he had waves of temptation and impulses, right? And he has had bouts of depression. And he received testimonies from Ellen White, right now, but he eventually joined the Baptists, and he wrote everything. He basically taught the Baptists how to attack the Adventists, right? And you know, who is Hull? His story is actually quite similar. Moses Hull was also a preacher for the Adventists. Is Moses Hull. He was one of the most prolific debaters. And one of the things that he loved to do was debate with spiritualists about the state of the dead. His name is Moses Hull. He loved to debate about with the spiritualists, right? And he was confident in his skills. He says that, I'm so good at debating that I can debate anybody. But he also suffered from waves of depression. Waves of depression. He would get these waves of depression, right? He also received testimonies from Ellen White. There's multiple testimonies specifically for Moses Hall. And Ellen White said, I'm going to read this to you. Elder Hall. He has relied upon his own strength instead of the strong arm of the Lord. And that mighty arm has been partially removed. And she goes on like this. And never should one man be sent forth alone to combat with spiritualists. If the cause of God really demands that we confront Satan and his host as represented by the spiritual medium, if enough is at stake to call for such a discussion, then several should go forth together, that with prayer and faith the host of darkness may be driven back, and the speaker shielded from angels that excelled in strength. Right? The problem is that one day he continued to go and debate the spiritualist. And the spiritualist, when he debated with the spiritualist, who was actually debating with him? Satan. It was Satan. Satan himself was debating with Moses Hall. At the end of that debate, what happened to him? He became a spiritualist. He became a spiritualist. And then he joined the spiritualists and became their teacher of spiritualism. He called it Christian spiritualism. Right? He made a school for spiritualists. Here, he became so famous as a spiritualist. And he joined the spiritualists. And he joined Victoria Woodhull and the women's rights wing movement. He joined what is called the women's equal right movement, the suffrage movement. And then he went into what is called free loveism. Because the women in those days, they wanted to have free love. They wanted to have, they're so repressed. They want to have freedom. And they went into this free love, and he joined the free love. He just went all the way to the other side, right? It's quite amazing. And the other thing is that Dudley Canright, he would go and debate spiritualists. And the thing is that when he went to debate spiritualists, these spiritualists will start talking in very unusual voices. And who are they debating now against? They're actually debating Satan. Do you think that you can debate somebody who has been practicing their craft for more than 6,000 years, and you think you're going to win against that entity? Right? Yeah, pretty amazing. And this person would start speaking with this very unusual voice, and they said, "Oh wow, he's demon possessed." And then when the people were all, it was amazing, because in those days they weren't really afraid. They were actually laughing at this spiritualist. And when he started laughing, and he says, "Hey, you are all geese," and everybody started laughing, and and Dudley Canright, well, that's it, I won. He won the debate. But after that debate, he would suddenly be overcome with these waves of depression. And he would suddenly, even after he won that debate, he would go and have some voices in his head that is asking him and telling him to become an atheist. It's quite amazing. You realize, what? It's Satan actually starting to talk to him. He's been debating with Satan. Right after that debate, he gets these waves of voices and feelings. Pretty amazing. Then, what happened? In February 17, 1887, he decided to go to his church in Otsego, Michigan. Where Otsego, Michigan is? Anyway, yeah. And this is what was written down by the church clerk, that he decided to give his resignation from the church. that he had come to a point where he no longer believed that the 10 Commandments were binding upon Christians. He had given up the law, the Sabbath, the messages, the sanctuary, position upon the U.S. in prophecy, Revelation 13. The testimonies, health reform, ordinances of humility. He also said that he did not believe that the papacy had changed the Sabbath. And though he did not directly state it, his language intimated that he would probably keep Sunday. He thinks that Seventh-day Adventists are too narrow in their ideas, and that in quoting so much that they do from the Old Testament, they are going back into the moonlight rather than experiencing the sunlight of the gospel of Christ. He thought we were exalting the law above Christ. Also has no faith in the missionary work as conducted by our people. Feels that it is not the way God designed to do the work. He still claimed to believe in the second coming of Christ was near, making the same application of the Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 and Matthew 24 that he always had, but did not believe that there was to be any special message preceding Christ's second coming in the sense in which Seventh-day Adventists teach. February 17, 1887. Even after he did this, he actually went back to his friend, G.I. Butler, who eventually became the General Conference president. He says, George, can you give me a chance at least once? I'm going to state why I decide to leave the Seventh-day Adventist Church and, and print it in the Review and Herald. And Butler said, okay. The thing is that he said, I'm leaving this with I don't have animosity against you as a people, right? But he wants to leave in good terms. And he says, I'm going to still preach, I'm still going to preach, but for another church, I'm not going to preach for it. So Butler actually gave him a chance. And he wrote in this, I actually looked it up, March 1, 1887. He wrote in the Review and Herald, personally, I have not one word of fault to find either with the church where I live or with those whom I have labored. I have been treated justly, liberally, and tenderly. There is not one hard feeling between us as far as I know. It will always give me pleasure to regard our people. Wait a minute. He just left the people and he still calls it our people. And speak of them as an honest and devout people. But believing that they are mistaken in their views, of course, I cannot preach with them, though I should be glad to do so. Yet it would be unfair to ask the privilege of giving my reasons for doing as I have done. They are perfectly satisfactory to me, and no one else is responsible for them. So Butler actually let him write his reasons for leaving. But then in the review, they started to write about Canright and say that he has gone into apostasy. And Canright always read the Review and Herald to see what the Adventists were doing. He always read it just to make sure he's up to what the Adventists are doing. And once he read that they wrote in the Review and Herald that he has become an apostate, then his language changed. Then he suddenly changed. He was no longer cordial to the Adventists. He became a bitter enemy to the Adventists, right? And he published what is called Seventh-day Adventism Renounced. He published it in 1889, right? He left in 1887. He published it in 1889. The amazing thing about this is that this little book has had 14 printings of it. 14 printings. Every year it was printed up until 1914. It became so famous because all the churches wanted it on how to attack Seventh-day Adventism. It was a lot of the other churches decided to use this as their template on how to attack Seventh-day Adventism because Dudley Canright was a defender. He debated against others on how, for the truth. So when he went against, he knew exactly where to to discredit, he wanted to discredit, where to attack them, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to, there's pages and pages and pages of his attacks, but I'm just going to pick a few of what he says about Ellen White, right? Because this is what we're, our goal is to actually say how he now views Ellen White. Remember what he said about Ellen White before? How kind and how, honest, what a wonderful Christian she is. I think how could this, Seventh-day Adventist church become so, grand truth with a leader like her if she was an apostate? It's impossible. And now this is what he says. Thus it will be seen that Mrs. White claims the very highest inspiration, the voice of God speaking directly through her. Her followers contend that she must either be a true prophetess or else a hypocrite. But she is neither. Few are aware what a powerful influence an excited religious imagination will ever have over a person. Enthusiasts and fanatics are generally honest people. Mrs. White is simply a religious enthusiast self-deceived. This I shall prove by stubborn facts. That she is not inspired is plainly shown by many facts. She have never wrought a single miracle. Oh, wow. That's actually not true, right? It was, there's multiple examples of when Ellen White actually, came and healed a person, right? Yeah. In all those 70 years, in all her 40 volumes, not a single prediction she had ever made has come to pass. She says in Spiritual Gifts, I am just a dependent upon the Spirit of the Lord in relating or writing our vision as having a vision. Here she claims that the very words in her visions recorded are divine inspiration. But I know that the words in her written testimonies are not inspired because when writing them, she will often change what she has written and write it very differently. I've seen her scratch out a whole page or a line or sentence and write it over differently. If God gave her the words, why did she scratch them out and alter them? Isn't this the same thing like what the leaders in 1919 Bible conferences? If you're revising the great controversy, how could you be inspired? Right. Daniels and Prescott was saying, if you're revising the great controversy, you can't be inspired. I have repeatedly seen her sit with pen in hand and read her manuscript to her husband for hours, while he suggested many changes, which she made. She would scratch out her own words and put it in his, sometimes whole sentences. Was he inspired too? Wow. Was Ellen White merely a pen, or was she an author? She's an author, right? She's both. She's both a pen and an author. And some things she would verbally, seems as if dictated. But on other things, she was given an inspiration, and she had to write it in her own words so people can actually help her. Does it mean that she's not inspired? As she is ignorant of grammar, right? He will say, she's never educated. She's not an educated person. Why do you want to follow somebody who's not educated? At late years, she employed an accomplished writer to take her manuscript and correct it, improving its wording, polish it up, and put it in popular style, so her books will sell better. One of them is Prescott. Prescott and Lacey. Yeah, Prescott and Lacey. They actually helped Ellen White. Thousands of words, not her own, are put thus in these other persons, some of whom were not even Christians. Are their words inspired too? She often copies her subject, this is what she's talking about, without credit or sign of quotation from other authors. Her last book, Great Controversy, which she lauded so highly as her greatest work, is largely a compilation from, right? So what is he saying? She's a plagiarist. The proof is abundant that Mrs. White's visions are merely the results of nervous disease, a complication of hysteria, catalepsy, and ecstasy. That she honestly believes in them herself, I do not doubt. I've known her nearly 30 years. I never knew her to make a confession of a single sin or evil in all that time. Not she. Seventh-day Adventists ridicule the Pope's claim to infallibility, but they themselves are bowing to the authority of a woman who makes her claims to infallibility than ever Pope or prophet did. Wow. Wow. It's amazing. What harm does she do? In many ways, it is an error and deception. She deceives herself and others. She teaches false doctrines. She has a harsh, uncharitable spirit and begets this all in all her followers. She builds up an isolated sect and thus destroys all their influence for good. Her teachings make her people narrow, bigoted, and gloomy. Thus she blasts the peace of thousands of souls. It leads her advocates to deceive, being afraid that it will hurt them in new pieces. It is known that in what light they really hold her visions. They keep them back as long as they can, and when they deny it, that it is a matter of importance with them. This is false and deceptive. Wow. For they hold faith in her visions to be as important as keeping the Sabbath. And they hold her visions to be as sacred as the Bible.
Oh, no, that's not true.
Wow. To defend her mistakes and error, both she and her apologists have to deny the plainest facts and resort to arguments very questionable. To defend her errors, they compare them to supposed errors in the Bible, and thus destroy faith in that book. She rules her whole people with a rod of iron, and dictates to them in everything, even the smallest and most private affairs of family life. Her severity and harshness have driven many to despair, others to backslide, and others out of the church. They produce doubts and infidelity. When those who have been led to firmly believe them finally come to see that they have been deceived, then they are in danger of losing faith in everything, so becoming out and infidels, or at least skeptical. You know, this book has been published over and over again. It became so popular. It was actually used by many of the preachers even in Australia, right where Ellen White was, right? And then, you know, we won't get it to this time, this Sabbath, but for next week, we're going to see what he will attack. And one of the reasons why he attacks Seventh-day Adventism is because the Seventh-day Adventism rejects the Trinity. That's why he attacks Seventh-day Adventists, right? And the Dudley Canright's attack of Adventism, Trinitarianism, is actually one of the reasons why the Adventists had to kind of like change their positions and start to make excuses for their understanding of the Trinity. And we'll see it next week, all right? Now, eventually it became so bad that the Adventists, George Butler here, his good friend, his buddy, his old friend, for when they were preaching, had to write a special extra. It's a Review and Herald extra. It's the last year of 1887. It was 19 pages long of what was wrong about Dudley Canright's book. And he would compare. This is Dudley Canright while he was in the light, his writings. And this is Dudley Canright when he was in darkness, right? He would compare it. Hey, this is what you used to say. This is what you're saying now. This is what you used to say about the Sabbath. This is what you're saying now. This is what you used to say about Ellen White. This is what you're saying now. He would compare everything, right? You know, you could. I actually downloaded this. It became so. It's very interesting to me, because you know one of the things you can actually find out is what our church our church responded. You know, okay. But here's. Why is this extra issued? In undertaking the unpleasant work of replying to the attacks of Elder Canright upon Seventh-day Adventism and their doctrines, we feel almost like offering an apology to the reading public. Huh. All right. Yeah. Okay. he goes and makes meetings. And the other thing what he does is he would actually go to meetings and he would charge these people $2. Now $2 is a lot in those days. Because the Seventh-day Adventist General Conference president is paid $12 a week. And every time he would have a meeting, these people from other religions would say, hey, how do you, you were once with them, how do you do this? And he would charge them $2 for meetings. Yeah. He was going from place to place, making our work his constant theme of attack. Now, G.I. Butler had a experience with him, and he wrote it. And it's a little bit of a story, but it's actually very, very telling. Elder Canright's good opinion of his own abilities had, during the meantime, become quite pronounced. He had a very high self-esteem of his ability to debate and to preach. He was never noted for patience, forbearance, or special regard of the opinion of others. He was a person who formed his conclusions remarkably quick and was inclined to be rash, and though in the main a genial, pleasant, frank companion, yet his desire to have his own way sometimes got him in trouble. He never could bear reproof with patience or feel composed when his way was crossed. When he came to mingle in important matters with brethren in prominent positions, these and other traits naturally got him in trouble. That's why he was never elected to be the president, because everybody could see this. Yeah, everybody could see this. Seventh-day Adventists believe in order and that positions of responsibility should be respected. Elder C had little respect for anyone's opinion unless it coincided with his own. When everything went pleasantly, when people were coming to his meetings and people were being converted, he could usually see things with clearness. When he was abused, as he always thought he was, when things did not go to suit him, the evidence of our faith became immediately to grow dim. Then suddenly he will fault the message. I have the ability. You know what the problem is? It's the message. He would blame the message. It's not my ability. The problem is that I'm preaching the wrong message here. That's why I'm not famous. Dark clouds of unbelief floated over his mental sky, and he felt that everything was going by the board. Here was the elder's special weakness. In the last December of that year, 1870, he held a debate with Elder Johnson, a Presbyterian in Monroe, Iowa. The writer was present. Elder C was not feeling in good spirits through the debate, though he presented his arguments quite clearly and met with success. The night following the debate, I occupied a room with him. I was greatly astonished to find him under powerful temptations to give up religion and the Bible and become an absolute infidel. Right? Even after winning debates and giving he would then suddenly have these waves, and then he would say, I can't continue doing this. Even just after giving a powerful sermon or debating, he would get these unusual waves of depression, right? And the thing, what he decided to do, he decided that, maybe it's because of my voice. So he decided to go to a professor of elocution. Nancy, you know what elocution is, right? Yeah. Elocution is how to project your voice, the skill of projecting your voice and using gestures. So that, remember in those days, there's no microphones, right? There's no microphones. And when you're talking to hundreds, it's about projection. You're able to, and it's an artificial way of talking so that everybody can hear you, right? And he says, if I will become good at this skill, then people will come and hear me, right? So then he had his friend who went to the same class with him, right? And when they actually went back, this friend, their technique was that one friend would criticize your technique. So this friend was hearing him. Okay, how can I criticize his technique? When he was talking, suddenly he went and talked about the Bible. And everybody in that room was taken with the message. They came up to him and says, wow, that was such a beautiful message. Even his friend that learned elocution with him, and says, wow, that was such a beautiful message. And Canright became so depressed. He became so depressed. He says, you know what? The reason why I am not more successful is because this message is holding me down. And right then and there he says, his friend told him, he called him DM. DM is not that your skills that is making you powerful. It is because of the message, right? Doesn't God actually choose people who are humble and rough and can't even speak? What about Moses? Could Moses speak? Was Moses an eloquent speaker? No, he wasn't Moses. But God chose Moses. Was Elijah somebody who looked good and presentable? No, God. Was Ellen White? Right? John the Baptist? Yeah. God chooses people not because how they present their skills and themselves to the public. It's because of the message. It is the message that will convert people. It's not about what you look like. Okay. Yeah, we're almost there, all right? We're coming to the conclusions here. Canright thought he was going to preach and give good revival discourses and would never do anything that Snook and Bernhoff did. Who Snook and Binkerhoff did? Snook and Binkerhoff is one of the first groups of Seventh-day Adventist pastors in Iowa that decided to go against Ellen White's inspiration. And they became one of the first ones. Obviously, Canright became one of them, and Kellogg and A.T. Jones. Yes. Kellogg and A.T. Jones. They all of them did not want Ellen White's reproofs. All of them doubted her inspiration. Right? His farewell remark at Otsego, which I came up there purposely to hear, when he talked about 3.5 quarters of an hour. The tears ran down his face as he told what he was going to do. He felt it just as clearly and fully as a man could, and thought he was going to be awful good. He says, even if I'm going to leave, I'm going to be great, right? I'm going to leave the Seventh-day Adventists, and I'm going to be great. But when he got over into the Baptist church, withdrew, and the Spirit of God ceased its influence upon him largely, he became the most bitter, wicked antagonist we have ever had since the denomination started. His book against Seventh-day Adventist is full of sneaking falsehoods. I do not say that he realizes they are such, but they are such. They are perversions of truth. Right? It became such a pity when you actually see what happened to him. He thought he was going to be so good when he joined the Baptists. They did give him a church of 200 people. By the end of 1 or 2 years, that church that used to be 200 under him became 25. Right? He was never given a high position, even in the Baptists. Right? Even though he had 2 churches, he was never given any important responsibilities. He never became an evangelist. Eventually, he lived off some of his royalties. But imagine those books that is attacking Seventh-day Adventism eventually stopped selling. Who could read Apostasy all the time? You need to read, better things.
Depressing.
Right? It's depressing just to read it. it's no longer, nobody's reading that. And he died miserably and eventually a nobody, right? Yeah. Even the Adventists, even among the Baptists, right? So this is what Ellen White says, right? One thing is certain. Those Seventh-day Adventists who take their stand under Satan's banner, what will they first do? Will they give up the Bible first? Will give up their faith in the warnings and reproofs contained in the testimonies of God's Spirit. They first doubt the spirit of prophecy and the testimonies. When you first start doubting, and it all started with Binkerhoff and what? I can't remember. Snook and Binkerhoff. Dudley Canright. Kellogg and A.T. Jones. Eventually, it became even sneakier because those were people who actually went out. Why is it so dangerous when the leaders inside the church start doing it?
We're told our bright lights are going on.
Because they become double agents. We think they become double agents. They're inside the church, they're doubting Ellen White. When we say, you know what is really bad when you do it outside, it's even worse when you're doing it inside. And you say, we're going to doubt Ellen White's historical inspiration. Her message about eggs and milk and all that, that's not inspired. This is the Seventh-day Adventist General Conference president who said this. When it's actually inside, they don't consider it as bad as Dudley Canright or if Snook and Binkerhoff said it outside.
Well, it's interesting today that many of the scientists today that are writing the books on health are saying that dairy products
Absolutely.
are terrible for a person's health.
It's amazing.
And the best diet that a person can have is a plant diet.
Absolutely. It's proven. It's already proven. It's amazing. The thing about it is, Ellen White already said it. This is for Seventh-day Adventism. It's for us. If we give up our faith in the warnings, in the testimonies, we are going to stand under Satan's banner.
Well, a lot of them are doing it based on their actions today in the church.
Satan is constantly pressing in the spurious to lead away from the truth. Here we go. The very last deception. What is the very last deception? The Omega Apostasy, right?
Yeah, the spirit of prophecy.
Right? The alpha of all heresy started with John Harvey Kellogg when he started misconstruing what the Spirit of God is. Right? Right. It's pantheism. The very last deception of Satan will be to make none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God, which is the testimony of Jesus, which is the spirit of prophecy. It's the Omega Apostasy, the very last. Where there's no vision, the people perish. Satan will work ingeniously in different ways and through different agencies to unsettle the confidence of God's remnant people in the true testimony. Right? Wow. So we see, the story of Dudley Canright was such a sad story, but we all are able to learn from it. It was not just something that's out there and says, we don't need to know it, because we can learn from it and realize that if we do not have a faith in the testimonies, right, the spirit of prophecy, that will lead us to actually then give up the Bible too. Right?
Nancy and I gave a seminar up in town up north of here, just a little ways. And that pastor, after he was in attendance to our seminar, and he says, I don't want you ever to come back because we quoted from the Spirit of Prophecy.
Yes.
He was upset that we were using spirit boxes.
This is what church is this?
Do you remember what church it was?
What's the,
Here in Florida? Yeah.
I can't think
Nancy,
of
if I
the
was
name
you,
of
I
the
would
town.
bomb him.
I'm sorry?
I can't think of the name of the town. It's north there off the interstate on the left-hand side.
What year?
Was it Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Seventh-day Adventist Church.
It's sometime
Do you see what happened? How did it all start?
Brooksville, Florida.
Brooksville,
Yeah.
Brooksville.
They were very upset
Brooksville
at us.
pastor.
Yeah, very. Don't ever come back here. That's what they said.
You should call him this guy's name.
Yeah. If you start attacking and going against the testimonies of the Spirit of Christ, Spirit of God, which is the spirit of prophecy, you will be under the banner of
My
Satan.
wife was the secretary of the General Conference in Florida here, and they were very upset
That
at
was
me
in, that was in Lakeland.
because I talked about soy and she used a lot of.
And that pastor told us never to come back either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've had quite a few, we've had people leave our seminars, they'd get up and they shouted at Dwayne once, no wheat, no soy, no sugar, no you, up.
Yeah. See, the problem is that we see this is not a new thing. This has started way back. And Ellen White already said it, right? Already said it, warned against it, so that we have to make sure that we know that we're not going to be blown away by the winds of doctrine, because the winds of doctrine is actually not from outside, it's from inside.
The sad thing about that one church is he came to us before our seminar and asked us, will you please help me with diabetes? And Dwayne told him, you know, and Dwayne was speaking, not I. And he said, no wheat, no sugar, no way off. He just
Yeah.
looked.
Wow. And with that is the more assured word of prophecy.